and welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 114. I'm John Jordan, and joining me today is Ben Cousens, who is the Chief Strategy Officer at Zebedee. How's it going, Ben?
It's going very well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good, yes, good. Let's start at the beginning. Ben Cousens, who is Ben Cousens, what's Zebedee, and how did you get into being Ben Cousens' Chief Strategy Officer at Zebedee?
I'll try and do the short version. So I started out in video games development as a teenager, initially in QA at a studio called Climax Group down in Portsmouth. And I kind of kept going back there all through school holidays, university, etc., working my way up the ranks. And when I graduated, I was working as a producer, and they had done a spin-out studio called Aruga at the time that was building free-to-play games in Flash for Facebook. Back then, you'll probably remember there was quite a big backlash about free-to-play, and Flash also itself was not exactly like the greatest development tool to work with. So I started kind of branching out. I could see that free-to-play games were going to be really successful, and so I guess the long story short is I sold my soul and I went into finance, but covering the games industry. I joined a merchant bank called Rain. I spent a number of years there. I met my wife there. But it was, we worked on deals like SoftBank acquiring Supercell and then selling it on to Tencent, Giant and Playtika. And then sort of fast forwarding a few years, in 2018, we worked on Epic Games' first big sort of fundraise that they announced. And we became their in-house corp dev team at that point in time, which gave me a nice kind of insight into how they were thinking about this whole metaverse play. In my personal life, I started to get interested in Bitcoin and crypto in about 2016 or 2015, actually, when my flatmate at the time, he was Argentinian, he was sending money home over the blockchain, and that was obviously the first use case being remittances. And that started to slowly take over my brain. I became the crank in the office who was running around telling everyone to buy Bitcoin. And it pushed me out of banking because it was, that industry is so regulated, and back then it was so Wild West compared to today that there wasn't a chance of us doing anything, that I could get actively involved with. So I moved into venture capital. I joined a fund called Lakestar, where I worked with Mika Salmi, who is the managing partner there, but he's also a great friend and he's really, really good. And we basically set up Lakestar's games investing, and then together we made about 8 or 9 investments, one of which was Zebedee. And the genesis for that is which obviously I wound up joining Zebedee, but the genesis for how that all came about is I was looking into games payments, and it was nothing to do with crypto or blockchain at all. This came out of back when I worked with Epic, and obviously what they've gone on to do in terms of suing Apple and looking at payments as a kind of vertical in games. Now, I was acutely aware that that payments is a broken thing in games. The user friction is very high, and the regulation prevents a lot of payment UX from being put directly in the game. And I was initially looking for fintech providers, like straight up, fintech services, think like your Revoluts and your Monzos and stuff like that. But it really didn't exist. And as I looked into it more, I realized that there were 2 or 3 major problems. One was that games is all microtransactions, and running that on fiat rails is very expensive. And the other was that these licenses that you need to handle money in video games are really prohibitive for a games developer. It's no games developer, if they're operating even something like Fortnite, they don't really want to be KYCing users upon first play, and they don't really want to have to go out and acquire money transmitter licenses all over the world just to deliver an entertainment product. And so I met the Zebedee guys in November 2019. It was 1 month after it was founded, and it was like just a very fortuitous moment in time where they had used Bitcoin to put payments in games, and it was all over the Lightning Network, which is sort of Bitcoin's scalable layer 2. So you could do these microtransactions in real time in games, and it was just marriage of 2 of my greatest interests, one being gaming and the other being Bitcoin. And as the company grew and I was working very, very closely with the team, I lost all kind of perspective, became completely biased, and fell in love with the company and wound up joining it full time in May last year.
Good. That's a good history. I didn't know all the Climax stuff. I used to. Was it Carl Jeffrey? We used to be the CEO down there.
Yes, yeah.
Wacky
So
chap.
Carl was a
times with
huge
Carl.
mentor to me. Yeah,
Okay.
he really. When I was in my teenage years, he taught me a lot of what I know. I know him well.
Okay, good, cool. So I didn't before you joined Zebedee. Simon and Christian came up to Manchester for a meeting, and I sort of met up with them. And I was like, these guys are doing sort of blockchain stuff for games, but it's Bitcoin, and I was just a bit not so sure about that. But since we've had a few conversations since then, and so I've sort of to a degree not being a Bitcoin sort of maxi at all, but it's sort of been converted to what you're doing, and it is. While you're doing it for gaming, which is interesting, it is basically you are looking at basically building sort of a payment system. An interesting bit with the games thing, I suppose, is that you have 8 decimal places of Bitcoin, so you can do these tiny ones. You could do one stat transactions, I suppose, but hundred stats transactions, which are you couldn't do in the fiat world. So how are game developers using you at the moment? I mean, it's obviously still early stages for where you are, but can you talk a little bit about those sort of first integrations and sort of, I guess, the impact? Because it's all very well moving these small amounts of money around, but if it's not helping the games sort of become more popular or make more money, then it's just sort of an interesting tech sort of solution.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's exactly how we look at it. And I want to just pick up on one thing you mentioned, because I think it's good for audience education, just in case they're not aware. But there's a huge unit bias thing in Bitcoin, where people look at one Bitcoin being whatever it is in the tens of thousands of dollars, and assume therefore the barriers to entry are too high. But Bitcoin is actually, just like the dollar is made up of 100 cents, Bitcoin comprises 100 million units of Bitcoin, which are called Satoshis in honor of Bitcoin's creator. They're abbreviated to sats, as you mentioned. But one sat, for everyone's kind of, just to frame it, is about 1/5000th of a US cent. So it's a very, very small unit of value. The Lightning Network essentially operates in Satoshis out of the box. It's designed for tiny payments, and they settle instantly, and they have essentially zero fees. But that enables us to send to a player, one Satoshi, 1/5000th of a cent, and we can send it so quickly we can even stream it in real time if people want. It has wide applications that I'm sure we'll get into, but to speak specifically to the gaming piece, we don't pretend that that Bitcoin can do things it can't. It's only really good for value transfer. It's what it's there to do. But what it can enable in being an internet native money is quite new experiences that I think appear simple but are deceptively deep as you go into them. So when we first opened up the API to third parties in sort of mid last year, we secured Vika Studios as the first dev who actually took a chance on us. And the gist of what they were looking at us for is they saw us as a very easy means of doing play and earn within about a week, because our API is very, very simple, and it was just to plug it into an existing game. Begin sharing your ad revenue with the players, and I'll get into the business model of it, and then you are effectively rewarding them in Bitcoin for their playtime. But what they saw, and what we've since seen now consistently along the 30-odd developers that we've got building on us, is that retention, engagement, ad impressions, and consequently monetization all go through the roof. And we're talking like 3 to 5x increases in retention. We've seen 600% increases in revenue per daily active user in some markets. More than that in other games in other markets. Actually, in Brazil, we saw one developer 15x their monetization per player. It completely changed their ability to scale there. And like I said, it's very, very simple. The developer is monetizing through ads and IAP. They're estimating their player lifetime value, and they're taking a small percentage of that, and they're giving it back to the player. But the player engagement more than offsets the reward you're paying them. We've also done tests around the elasticity of these rewards. So, how much or how little can you give a player before this effect starts to diminish? And we have found that actually you can take it unbelievably low. You can reward 200 to 500 satoshis a day, and that's maybe a couple of, it's not even, it's a couple of cents maybe. My sat math is not great today, but it's a tiny amount of money, and that you'll still see these kind of uplifts. The nice thing about this is it's highly scalable, because your ability to reward players is correlated completely with your game growth, right? So as your user growth increases and you get more players, you're getting more ad revenue, which gives you more money to share back to the players. You can then start to optimize by region and geography, and there is arbitrage there where if you're getting a lot of users in the US, they monetize so much better that you can actually start increasing the rewards in, say, Latin America or India, which draws more users there. So you get this nice kind of, you never break the bank, and you never run at risk of kind of like overpaying, because it is linked to your actual revenue that you're generating, but you are significantly increasing the monetization of your game.
Absolutely. And it is sort of interesting, because I guess a lot of times people who and potentially rightly so, sort of criticise the blockchain games industry in general for sort of like saying, well, you love blockchain, so you're like hammering it into these sort of products that don't need it at all. Whereas this is sort of the opposite. It's sort of like just a new business model that happens to use. I mean, if you could do this on fiat with normal money, then this would be a key part of the games industry. But because these transactions are so small, you can't do it on fiat. The fact that you're using Bitcoin in this case just enables these new things without you really mattering that you're running on Bitcoin. It could be you could run on something else, or you couldn't, but theoretically you could run on anything.
Absolutely.
And the blockchain bit doesn't matter.
That is the gist of it. I mean, so from our perspective, we recognize that 90% plus of gamers, or even people out there in society, they just don't care about Bitcoin and crypto. If you give it to them, they might like it. Most of the time they just sell it. They're like, okay, cool, you gave me a few quid, I'm going to sell that, collect the money. So we are actually, one of the benefits of how we set ourselves up is we established ourselves as a regulated payment services provider. In less sort of convoluted speak, basically we're legally allowed to handle money, and we can handle it and send it around globally. And as a result of that, we can also plug into fiat infrastructure very smoothly. So I would expect to see a lot more announcements from us about essentially making the Bitcoin piece of the puzzle completely disappear and representing payments and value transfer in users' local currencies. I'm very intrigued by the idea of, I'm trying to think of a realistic example given latency in games, but let's say we're playing PvP and I'm in New York and you're in Canada, and so we're close enough that we can play each other without it being laggy, but you're on Canadian dollars and I'm on dollars. Well, what if in the game I saw dollars in my UI, you saw Canadian dollars in your UI, but when I paid you, we on the back end routed all that through Bitcoin, but you on either end you're receiving your local currency. And this is the stuff we can enable. We think that is particularly powerful in, as I mentioned, PvP, so competitive play in esports, but also in any games which have a trade economy, so where players are actually able to meet with one another and exchange goods. And it's also just generally useful around community engagement. So if we released these things called Zebedee bots at Gamescom actually, and they're like the lightest touch way of engaging with our platform. It's like a one-click, add the bot to your server, and you can then start paying out Bitcoin to your users on the server, and it's a very good engagement tool. You could set up a quest, for example, like, everyone go for level 50, and the first 5 people who do it each get 100,000 satoshis, which is, I don't know, about 20 quid or something. And players will do it, and they'll really engage. And we've seen one developer partner grew from 1,000 Discord users to 30,000 Discord users in about a month just from doing that. And we think that's where this payment technology is so powerful. The same stuff that works in Discord works in the games, works in Twitch, it works across the internet, because we're not. We like to speak of ourselves as being like Switzerland. We're not here to make strong opinions about like which crypto is going to win, which isn't. We're here to connect up payments online and in virtual worlds, and we're using Bitcoin to do it. But it's a commercial decision, and it's related to regulation as opposed to being like strictly ideological.
No. No, I mean, maybe delve into that point a little bit. That it is interesting that obviously Bitcoin, is still the sort of the largest sort of crypto by market cap and trading volume. As sort of an aside, the interesting point is people have been doing obviously sort of play and earn games before in their own currency, and we sort of see what happens when you have people who, as you say, just they don't care about holding the stuff; they're just going to sell it. Well,
yeah.
As much Bitcoin as you can put through your system is not going to change the price of Bitcoin for people selling it.
Maybe if we captured every 2 billion gamers out there, like we might be able to move the price. But yeah, that's one reason you've touched on specifically why we picked Bitcoin. And we considered very, very, very early on. There were discussions around launching your own token and using stable coins. The reason, I think the latter is more interesting. Like, why not use stable coins? And the reason is that the layer 2s that they are built on are still insufficient for the types of micropayments we're doing. I think one not very well known thing about Lightning is that Lightning is not a blockchain. It is another protocol that sits on top of Bitcoin. So if you have, I'm going to get a bit geeky, but if you have, people in Bitcoin talk about like LNP. BP, like Lightning Network Protocol, Bitcoin Protocol, in the same way that you have TCP IP, and it was the combination of the Internet Protocol with I forget what TCP stands for, Transmission Something Protocol. It was the combination of that enabled the Internet to be scalable, and Lightning and Bitcoin is like the same thing. Bitcoin's like a settlement layer, that's a blockchain. Lightning is doing the equivalent of packetizing value and sending it around the internet speed. So people talk in blockchain land about, how many transactions per second can you do? Bitcoin on Lightning has no theoretical ceiling. Like, it is as fast as your bandwidth and as fast as there is liquidity available in the network. Liquidity for gaming purposes at present is abundant. Like, there's no issue there. So, we feel really confident being able to handle, say, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of concurrent users on the platform, all sending each other tiny micropayments, because we will not hit a ceiling anytime soon on transactions per second.
And I guess in terms of Lightning, as much as I followed it, it goes through like everything sort of peaks and troughs of sort of interest, and people got very interested, I think, in sort of I don't know, 2020 it's going to be the year of Lightning, and Lightning is sort of interesting. I suppose it's been a technology looking for someone to use it, and it's sort of I guess gaming is obviously one of those things that you were probably one of the biggest sort of single providers of or users of Lightning, because no one else seems to be doing it very much.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I think in Bitcoin land, everyone is ecstatic about Lightning, as far as I can tell, and there's a growing number of services using it. But while we don't disclose our user numbers, we're aware that we are probably the most used Lightning service out there. We know already that we're the largest Web3 gaming wallet in terms of installs and users. We'll disclose numbers when we're proud of them, but right now I think we look at it like all of Web3 gaming in user-based terms is a drop in the ocean compared to gaming audience terms. So we'll make noise when we're relevant from a gaming audience perspective. But we do see that we are driving a lot of activity on Lightning and a lot of adoption of Lightning. We've spoken to our younger, sort of late teen, early 20 users, and they refer to us as using the new Bitcoin, or using Bitcoin the new way, which I find very interesting from like a sort of perception perspective. I just think Lightning is something where, for the longest time, I remember it being criticized as being vaporware, but people were not understanding that it needed to organically build liquidity. And one of the ways you had to build liquidity was by incentivizing node usage. When Lightning was very early on, there really wasn't a way to run Lightning without running your own Bitcoin node. Fortunately, over the last sort of 3 or 4 years, running a Bitcoin node has become really quite trivial. And there are some very nice out-of-the-box packages that essentially let users set up a Lightning node in 1 or 2 clicks. Once that happened, and I saw most of this when I was in venture capital, the usage of Lightning really took off. And that was when there became sufficient liquidity in the network to start building businesses on top of. And I think you're seeing now the first wave of that. We're one of them, but there are other things coming out as well. Like I don't know if you've come across what's been nicknamed Podcasting 2.0. Have you seen that?
No.
Okay, so in Podcasting 2.0, you, John, could be earning Bitcoin from your listeners who are paying you per second that they stream your podcast through apps that are Podcasting 2.0 enabled. It's an open standard. It's just RSS with some Bitcoin plugins. But that is all over Lightning, and there are services such as Fountain that are building on this, and they're also enabling the podcasters to share their sponsor revenue back with the audience. So you get these circular economies of listeners earning from the podcast and listeners directly tipping the owner of the podcast with money. So it is getting to be more than just gaming now. But I think it's underreported essentially. I think Lightning will be one of the biggest stories in the crypto space over the next 5 to 10 years. But as with all things in Bitcoin, there's no marketing department, and there's no one like aggressively out there promoting stuff. So it has to happen organically.
Yeah, good. So if I had any advertisers, then I would be giving my money away, but I don't.
But there are Bitcoin podcasts out there. I mean, there's some podcasts I listen to that have no ads, but they rely on the users sponsoring them, like sending in money. And some of them are making a decent amount. I wouldn't say you could make a living off it yet, but they're getting, they've got a big enough audience that they might be pulling in up to $1,000 a month or something, just in tips. Which is it's nice to see, and I can see that being widely extensible across the internet. I mean, we've done plugins for Twitch specifically for that purpose. We have a streamer product, so that if you are, showing off to your audience, they can actually tip you directly, and you keep 99%. And that's, I think those economics as well of direct to fan monetization are much more appealing to anyone in the creator economy.
Yeah, cool. So let's get a bit more specific. So in terms of, you sort of mentioned there, you have a wallet. So if I'm sort of someone who wants to check out Zebedee and what it does, how do I sort of go about that?
Yeah, the best thing to do by a mile is just download the app. In the app, there are links out to games that are powered by us that you can play. You get a Lightning wallet out of the box. You also get what we call gamer tags, which is essentially like a username that you can send money to and from. And you get what's called a Lightning address, which is something that our CTO pioneered, and that's a Bitcoin address that it looks like an email, but anyone can send money to it. So you get this sort of full package. And then when you play games, most of them, in fact, all of them right now are essentially earning apps, right? You earn for free, and we're never talking about life-changing money here. That's not the point. The objective is not that you start playing early and you luck out and you make $1 bazillion. The idea is that this is more of like an engagement and retention hook, and you are now somewhat more fairly rewarding the players for their time and attention. On the developer side, we're actually just in the process of moving to self-serve. We've been carefully white gloving most of the early developer partners, but we're now at a scale where we can just open the floodgates. But at the moment you come to us, you tell us what you want to build. We give our API access very liberally, and you get into a developer dashboard where you get your own developer wallet, but you can also create per game wallets, and then you hook in the API somewhat like Stripe. And wherever you want to, any reward or any payment is driven by game logic. So you could build. I'm careful saying this, but you could build, the equivalent of smart contract logic in the game where payments are triggered in that game environment based on player activity. Putting it in less abstract terms, it could be like, if the player jumps through this hoop, lands on this box, and then sidesteps right, well, then they get the combo bonus and you send them more money. We've also done that in Counter-Strike, where knife kills are earn you more money than a pistol kill or a shotgun kill, for example.
And that's what I was going to come to. At the moment, because of the these games are sort of ad-funded games, because that's how the revenue's being generated and sort of portioned off. Mainly, you're in sort of hyper-casual mobile games, but that's just the sort of where you are at the beginning. Theoretically, any game could integrate Zebedee in any number of ways.
Yes, there's multiple facets to this. So I think the first to understand is that we are like a payment rail, right? So there's where it can work in any game. It can actually work in any web environment. Wherever you want a payment to be, you can use our API to do that. So it doesn't matter whether it's a complicated, multifaceted MMO or if it's just, Sudoku for Bitcoin, which exists. Then what it is that actually we've got, a number of developers who are building much more complicated games with us. I think we should be, and the first MMO that has integrated us should be previewing in, maybe the end of this month. But obviously deeper games require deeper development. So the reason we've been able to show off a lot more in hyper casual is because the integration into a hyper casual game takes 3 to 5 days, and then you maybe take another 5 days, creating some assets like coin art and stuff. But it's very quick, and you can get to market quickly, and you can A/B test quickly, and then you can scale up from there. If you're choosing to do a PvP game or even something marginally more complex in mobile like a Farmville style game, it requires more dev time. So there's no getting around that, but it doesn't change where our payment system can be plugged in. We've also, to be honest, we've consciously focused on casual and hyper casual games as well, and there's a few reasons for that. But the first being that I was aware from my time in VC that a lot of hyper casual games struggle with retention and therefore long-term monetization. And we were betting that if you put this in, then it'll all change completely. And it does. We're now seeing hyper casual games with 6 month to 8 month retention, which is just mad. But now there is an appropriate incentive to keep playing, whereas before you had to kind of try and make up some meta or something, but now you don't need to bother. The incentive is the payment. And it also scales to a broader user base. That when people talk about there being 3 billion gamers, one of the things that makes me chuckle is that if they then immediately pivot the conversation to talking about MMOs, it's like that is the nichest of the niche of games. There's maybe 50 million people who play MMOs in any kind of hardcore capacity. The billions of gamers are playing Candy Crush and simple, casual, fun mobile games that you play at a bus stop. So we consciously targeted that because that is how you get to scale. And the other side of that as well is that because of the way our system works, one, that it's regulated, two, that we're using a cryptocurrency that the market understands somewhat, and three, the fact that we're not trying to circumvent anything. We're available on iOS and Android effectively, so there's no issues distributing on mobile if you have Zebedee integrated in your game. And as a result of that, we can basically get this into the hands of more people. And we know that the vast majority of our user base were previously what we call no coiners, right? They had no crypto awareness whatsoever. And that's, if there's another pillar to what Zebedee's about, it's about UX. We don't think that a good, fast, friction-free onboarding for a player should involve writing down a seed phrase. It is, most people can't remember their Google passwords, let alone their the password to all of their money in the world. So we're very careful about when this stuff comes in, and we just believe there's an education process, right? If you're giving someone a few cents and those add up to a few dollars, and then those dollars add up to $20 to $50 over time, there does come a point at which you want to say to the user, okay, listen, this is your money. You should probably take control of it and therefore learn about crypto. But until that moment, why would we create headaches for games developers in terms of onboarding users? Why don't we make it as smooth as we possibly can, so that you maximize both the conversion of those players and these uplifts that we're talking about? If you want to drive retention, you can't flip the player out of the game and have them go through a 10-minute sign-up process. It needs to be 5 seconds and then they're back in.
Yeah. But I guess as you are as you mentioned, you are a regulated business for money transfer. At some point, obviously, a sort of KYC thing has to sort of kick in. Is there a sort of a legal limit that people have to reach? Or?
Yes, there are restrictions, and there are moments at which we have to KYC. The fortunate thing is I'll tell you where they roughly sit and how and when these come in, and then I'll tell you the actual statistics we see on our platform. But basically, if you're looking to send, I think it's north of $600 or $250. It can depend. But if you're looking at sending, let's call it in the hundreds of dollars, you're probably going to be prompted to KYC. In reality, the average transaction size on our platform is 2 cents.
Yes.
We're just doing millions of them.
Yeah.
So there is, whilst we do have to KYC users when they get to certain balances or if they want to send certain amounts of payment, from a money laundering risk perspective, we're considered very low risk because we're talking in cents here most of the time. No, we would, if any bad actor was to come on the platform and try to send, significant money through our platform for nefarious purposes, they would stick out like a sore thumb. Like it would be the first, we'd spot it immediately. So we know that we can have this kind of KYC light approach where you join the app, you use it for free. You can log in with Discord, log in with Twitter, log in with Google or whatever, get back to your playtime. And if at some point you decide you like Zebedee, or at some point you decide you're getting into this Bitcoin thing and you start buying Bitcoin and funneling it through Zebedee, you'll be prompted to KYC at that point in time.
Okay. But you say most people are just sort of spending it.
Yes, and that's actually interesting, right? Because the whole stereotype with Bitcoin is like hodl, right? And you just never let go. We don't see that, and what we see is that actually, if people are earning money for free, they tend to view that they tend to view it as a gift, so they're willing to spend it a little bit. They're not going to necessarily spend all of it, but they do give back. So as we see users sending millions of transactions over the Discord bots all the time between each other. We do see pretty active tipping going on. Through our Chrome browser extension, you can start tipping people on Twitter. We see that happening. So there's lots of people are actually spending and using this, and we do have something underway to enable users to spend their balances in game and in app. Stay tuned on that front, but we think we figured out how to do it with Apple's seal of approval stuck on top.
Okay. Excellent. No, it's a good sort of perception thing, isn't it? That actually, obviously, far too much in the sort of in the blockchain world, we get fixated by these sort of big NFTs that cost all these hundreds of thousands of dollars, and the price of tokens going up and down, and all the you got people made millions or lost millions, and obviously that's the human sort of psychological interest in the big figures. But actually, maybe the revolution is happening in these tiny little figures, and it's sort of as you say, it's a gift. It's sort of free money, and people. But actually, if enough people are moving that around, then actually that becomes a sort of very interesting sort of ecosystem of value that can sort of see how it plays out.
Yeah, if I'm a bit utopian, one of the things that I got very, very excited about when I first met the Zebedee team and started working with them was the idea of a completely interoperable game money, right? The fact that I could maybe earn $10 in Counter-Strike and then open Fortnite and spend those $10 immediately on some skins I wanted, and then maybe I earn from that and I take that money somewhere else, and you have this full ecosystem where it works because no one and everyone owns the money, if you know what I mean. If there's I think it's a far more complicated commercial conversation if you want to spend V-Bucks on Steam. Right, there's so many parties become involved so quickly, and incentives are so misaligned that this is why you don't see it happen, is the kind of short answer. But if there's a money everyone can agree on that no one can agree on at the same time, then that's probably the likely candidate, and therefore it's going to be fiat or Bitcoin or maybe ETH or another currency. And so I that excited me a lot at the beginning. And then the other thing I also felt, and this is I have a fairly strong opinion on this, is that blockchain gaming is as it currently stands is very exciting, but like I said, it's targeting an incredibly niche audience, and for every one that will work, and there's definitely going to be some blockchain games that knock people's socks off in the next 18 months, they are still not the mass market. They are more proof points as we kind of transition into this kind of new genre, in my opinion. In the same way that free-to-play took a decade, right? It started, and then there was Clash of Clans, and that showed people one way of doing it, and obviously Farmville did it before that. And about 7 or 8 years later, after Farmville, then the playbook really started to become clear, and game studios were able to confidently release free titles and monetize them, and then it grew from there. But there was a time lag, and I think that time lag is what a lot of both investors and builders in the space struggle to assess properly. And I'm not saying I'm better at it than others, but I'm conscious of having seen one of these periods that it's not I don't believe it's going to be some big bang where like you release one and then every game works and everyone suddenly swaps over to blockchain gaming overnight. It's that nothing happens that way. Not without some sort of state decree. So I don't see that happening soon, and therefore focusing on very, very casual, simple use cases where the learning curve is nearly zero has a higher probability of driving success, and I think we're now beginning to see that.
Cool, good. And on that note, I think I'll say thank you very much, Ben, for your insight. There's really good stuff in there today.
Cheers, John. Thank you very much.
And thank you to you for watching and listening, however you're consuming the podcast. Obviously, your point of action is to go down to your app store of choice and download the Zebedee app and set that up and start messing around with some of those games. And my point of action is to become podcast 2.0 and set up a wallet that you can tip me. So clearly, wins all round there. But thanks for watching the podcast. Please subscribe to the channel. So every episode we are talking to the multitude of people who are sort of building out this blockchain gaming world, which we're all fascinated about. Sort of as Ben described there. No one sort of exactly knows what's going to happen, but lots of people are innovating and just intellectually very interesting. So I hope you're enjoying that. Please subscribe and come back next time.